So, for blog number 8, we read chapter 6, which is the resources of organization. And so, in this chapter, he goes over the thesis, developing an outline, the 3 basic types of organizational structures, their function, and strategic value. And they also provide some guidelines for introductions and conclusions to better adapt to the audience. And so, starting off with the thesis, this needs to be one simple sentence, so only one and only one idea. It needs to be a declarative sentence, so a statement, assertion, or claim. It needs to limit your topic, so it narrows your subject. It needs to suggest your purpose, so it implies the kinds of response you want, whether it be understanding, belief, or some type of action. And it also needs to be a capsule version of everything you will say. And one note is that a thesis should never be stated quite as bluntly than it may appear in your outline. And so moving on to the outline, outlining is extremely important and it can be considered the DNA of it all. And so there should be a thesis on top for the outline. There should be a thesis on top, followed by a body of introduction, a body of speech, and a conclusion body, as well as good usage of Roman numerals through it all. And so, with the different forms of organization, there are actually 3 different types. There are sequence structures, topical structures, and logical structures. And so, first one, sequence structures, these actually include chronological, narrative, and spatial sequences. And so, the chronological sequence organizes an idea over time. The narrative sequence organizes an idea in story form, and the spatial sequence organizes an idea in a directional pattern. And so the next one is the topical structures, and these develop ideas in parts and perspectives. And so in parts, it organizes an idea by subtopics, and perspectives organize an idea by familiar divisions. And the last one being logical structures, these include causal and problem solution. And so causal organizes an idea by showing a cause and effect relationship, and problem solution organizes an idea in 2 parts. The first, showing the harm and scope, being the problem, and the second, showing remedy, being the solution. And so now, to adapt structure to the audience, there needs to be a specific attention. There needs to be a calling of attention to the problem. There needs to be a need. You need to demonstrate that a need exists. Then satisfaction, you need to show the audience that the need can be met. It's important to use visualization. You need to describe vividly and concretely what will happen if the problem is or is not solved. And then you need to call for immediate action from the audience and show them how to bring about the solution. Now this is a motivated sequence and it is extremely effective in presentation to an audience. Now for introductions, the most basic functions of an introduction are to gain attention, create accurate expectations in the audience for what follows, and to suggest the relationship between the subject and audience. With a conclusion, a great basic conclusion is one that summarizes the major ideas that leads to the claim that is your thesis and fixes a specific purpose in the audience's mind. And now moving on to our readings, we read Sontag's, Osterweil's, Denby, and Content Marketing Associations. And so the first essay, she goes over science fiction films, and hence the title, The Imagination of Disaster. It only feeds our imagination into disaster. And so she basically states that by watching science fiction movies, our minds get filled with all the imagination, the terrors, and it can even fill us up with anxiety of all the fantasies built in these movies. And so the next essay is basically discussing the relationship between Hollywood and surveillance, specifically the active involvement of films and America's surveillance. And so different surveillance techniques have been very well known to be used in movies and television, and it creates the fear of total surveillance, which is something that can be a total nightmare. And the end line is that films displaying these harmful surveillance acts may influence others to do the same, which could potentially lead to a potential total surveillance in the future. So, and Denby's essay goes over the timeline of Hollywood movies and how it's all gone downhill from the beginning. And this essay does state that American movies still have great and talented filmmakers and directors, but Hollywood movies are now in a terrible crisis compared to the starting years of filmmaking, and movies have gone extremely downhill, and as a result, moviegoers do not feel completely satisfied with these movies. So the last one is the 7 Steps to the Perfect Story, and I really enjoyed this one because it gave us a really good visual of the specific 7 steps to better help us become more powerful and effective storytellers. And I really enjoyed that the golden rule was don't give the audience 4, give them 2 plus 2 by Andrew Stanton, director of WALL-E. And I think that's the perfect quote for the perfect movie or story.